Thanks anybody who is tuning in live. This is the SG Podcast, episode 67. I'm here with author and realtor Shawn Kunkler. Really excited to have him on the show today. Shawn, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate having your time.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. So Shawn, let's get started. I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about you, kind of what it is you're focused on, and we'll get into the background of how you got there as well.
Yeah, for sure. What do you want? Just kind of the big overarching?
Yeah, well, why don't we start with telling the audience kind of, who you are, what you do right now, and then
Sure.
and then I can do some deeper digging.
That's totally fair. So my primary focus as of right now, I am a full-time realtor in San Francisco. I authored a book, The Insider's Guide to Home Buying, and which we'll talk about, but I've really highly leveraged that into my marketing piece. And currently I'm in the process of launching Solopreneur 180, which is because it really talks about all the trials and tribulations of that.
Got it. Very cool, Shawn. So how long have you been a realtor for? And I'm interested to learn kind of how you got into the industry to begin with.
That's just a great question. So I've been in the game for 4 years, and as I was cutting my teeth and getting started, my first real estate transaction in San Francisco was for $2.67 million.
Cool.
And it definitely pushed me into an amazing direction right out of the gate.
Awesome. And so what brought you to that first deal to begin with? Or what were you doing before that?
Prior career, before ever even getting my license.
Mm-hmm.
So it's layered a little bit, but my bread and butter has always been sales through and through. And it's been kind of stacked into other careers along the way. So I really had my first sales job per se. It was part-time weekend thing when I was 18 years old. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I love this. But more recently and prior to, I was running martial arts schools. And then I got into, I was the membership director at a couple different gyms. And during that evolution, I just happened to serendipitously be working out at the same time as my good friend Dean, who just happens to be a commercial agent. And during our workouts, we would talk about real estate. And that's really when I first started to get the idea of it.
Right. Now, when you were talking about real estate, were you kind of, investing in it or taking part in it already, or was it just purely out of interest and like, was it clear from the beginning that this could be a potential career path, or did it kind of manifest throughout those conversations as they went on?
That is such a good question. I don't think it was linear. It wasn't kind of like this led to that and it was immediate. It was definitely a what is it, the saying, as a crow flies. It was not a straight line. So I had bought my first property in 2008. If we all remember, that was the gigantic crash. I bought it right prior to.
Oh boy, that was
timing,
my next question. Yeah.
As an investor, I was spot on. But our conversations were he was in commercial, but he would dabble in investing and developing property and selling them. So I was always curious and interested and intrigued in that path. But point blank, I became really good friends with him, and I don't even know how we got on the subject. And one day he told me how much he made in his first year, and my jaw hit the floor. And it was a number that was so big that I went home that night and ordered the whole, like, take your test online. I swear to God.
Yeah.
I was like, that's significant. So that's really when that was the tipping point.
Got it.
But it was a culmination. And it's like, when you hang out with your friend all the time and they're a positive friend, just virtue of osmosis, you kind of start picking up what they're throwing down.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the many benefits of the old, you are the average of the, 5 closest people that you spend the most time with. Is if you're friends with or spending a lot of time with successful people, it's ought to rub off on you, at least in one way or another at some point. Very cool, Shawn. So that's like a pretty interesting shift, right? Going from what you were doing prior to studying and writing the real estate exam. Um,
Yeah.
what was it like? Like, what were those few weeks like as you were studying, as you were making the shift? In your head, was it, I'm going to become a full time real estate agent? Or was it, you know what, I'll take the test, I'll give it a try, and maybe kind of ease into it?
That's it's interesting. My path has never been linear. So during that time, I got the test. I was working full time, like 60 hours a week, and I honestly I just didn't have time. Let me rephrase. I didn't make time. I didn't allocate time to study, and I
Right.
have really good excuses of why I didn't. And during that time, I had met somebody else who was working on inventing and creating um, wireless headphones. And this
Hmm.
was like just before Apple came out with theirs and before all the big players got to the scene. It was just like you just had Beats that were wired. It was that era. And I wound up investing a decent amount of money and moving over and working for that company. And it just tanked, went sideways, lost all my money in that. And it was at that bottom point is when I decided to go full on into real estate, and I took it seriously. I studied like it was a full-time job. And then the second I got my license, I was just there. I hit the ground running.
Got it. And so you dropped everything else? Like once you got the license, it was like,
No,
no?
no, there's another twist. So at
I'm.
that point, I had lost all my money and now needed to rebuild my account.
Mhm.
And I had my license. So I'm hustling, building up that business. The perfect timing. It was my birthday. Another friend of mine who owned a small boutique gym pinged me, "Happy birthday!" And we traded a few instant messages. And she's like, "Hey, look, I need somebody to come in here and clean up the sales team. Are you available?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
available." So I wound up going there for 6 months in order to build up my reserves before taking the full leap.
Jeez. Shawn, it's been 8 minutes and there's a clear theme of non-linear paths already
Oh,
happening here.
there's
So
more.
I mean, yeah. So what happens next? Was that a 6 month contract, or was it got to a point where she kind of got what she needed and you were ready to move on? And what brought on the that first deal, that first real estate deal?
Solid question as well. So that path was the intention was full time, and the the intent was to basically build up their sales team. So for 9 months prior to me getting there, they hadn't hit goal. They were the attrition rate was through the roof. They weren't. It just things weren't clicking. The gym's awesome, and everything. The employees, the members, everything's on point. It was just no one was closing. I got there. The first month we hit goal, and we consecutively either hit or exceeded it for every single month from the moment I got there, which I'm really proud of. And that's really that's the core of my attitude that I took into real estate. And as soon as I had it, it was actually before I even had enough really saved to do it comfortably. I just decided to pull the trigger and go all in, gave my
Hmm.
notice, and went head on into real estate. Um, I think it was interesting, even with all these paths. I know they sound really haphazard and aggressive, and just like a ping pong, but I do my research and I try to strategically make the next best move.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's a slam dunk winner, and I get to write home about it. With real estate, what I did strategically is I figured out who's my ideal client, what price point do I want to be, what types of property, where do I want to sell them, and then I reverse engineered it and I figured out which brokerages were doing those transactions, and then within those brokerages, who were the players, like who were those agents that I had to be around, because to your point, you're the sum of your closest peer group, whoever they are. And I knew that I just had to get around the right players. And there's a woman in particular, Helena, I became good friends with her. She trusted me with her multi-million-dollar listings. I held her opens, and virtue of being at the right place at the right time with the right attitude, I was able to I secured that first transaction for 2.6. At the same property, I also met this other couple who I'm actually friends with all my clients. I met another couple, and I think it was 3 weeks later, they had purchased a property for 1.8. So I really was able to hit the ground running very aggressively. But to back up, I don't think there's any missteps in life. And I think all of the way, whenever we meander from one career to the next, we stack skills and we take those with us. And when I was at the gym, it was actually, it was the way it was viewed and perceived in the marketplace was it was a affluent athletic club, or a modern day country club. And within that, we catered to the affluent clientele of San Francisco. So that job allowed me to be comfortable talking to E and C level executives all the time.
Right.
Very high net worth individuals. And then within that, I built up my LinkedIn. And then within that, I built up my Facebook. And then I basically surrounded myself with those people. So when I moved into real estate, I was able to pull all of those pieces with me, in addition to knowing sales and having those various skill sets.
Got it. And I do want to go much deeper into the real estate and how you kind of moved on from those first two big deals, but I don't
Yeah.
want to gloss over the 6 to 9 months you spent at the gym, Shawn. What was it, do you think, that made you so good at sales to begin with, right? You said from that first part-time job at 18, it just kind of clicked,
Yeah.
right? It was just, it came to you naturally. So
Yeah.
number one, I'm interested to hear about that. And then number two, why was the gym not able to succeed on their own? And then what did you do to improve upon it that resulted in those amazing numbers?
All solid questions. So let's go back to when I was 18 and have my first sales job. I do think I've been asked this many of times, and I struggle with it, and I still don't have an answer. But the question that's been posed is: Are some salespeople just naturals? I think there's natural qualities, but I also think sales is a perishable skill, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel that most of the skills can be conditioned. You can learn them, but it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take time. And when I was 18, um, my now ex, but she was working at a motorcycle seat company
Hmm.
that they made motorcycle seats for Harley Davidsons. And there was an event called Americade, and they basically needed people to help pack and unpack the truck. And I was like young and dumb at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it for some money under the table. And we showed up the first day when the tents all open and all these motorcycles are coming in, and I just had the basics from the president. The president was there, the VP was there. I think four or five salespeople were there. Anyways, I just went out and did my thing, and it was 2 days of that. Sunday night we were at dinner, and it was like this huge lobster dinner and celebrating. And the president stands up and gives the speech and thanks everybody for being there. And he was like, "Listen, I'm just blown away." He's like, "I didn't expect this, but let me run down who would produce the top sales of the weekend." And he was like very proud that he was number one, but number two was me,
Hmm.
followed by all the sales reps who were classically trained. And like this 18-year-old, I had no idea what I was doing. So that really just, I had many other different career paths along the way, but that planted something deeply inside my soul. So
Very
now to
cool.
fast forward
Mm-hmm.
to being at the gym, I'm a firm believer that 80% is just showing up, show up with the right attitude, and 20% is having the actual tools, the skills, and everything else needed, but showing up with the right attitude. So when I when I got to the gym, their database was just kind of, it wasn't cleaned, and they had two places where they were keeping leads. I put everything together, and then I basically recruited few of my now friends, but Vanessa and Katie, who were running different departments in Stella. And with membership at a gym, once you sell the base membership, then you can sell all the ancillary. You can sell all the different fitness and things like that. So I recruited them to help me sell, to help them sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I I basically created a sub team to help get everybody excited. And in doing that, it really just added rocket fuel to what they were already doing. I just kind of organized the system, gave them a follow-up, like this is what you do. These are the talking points. Here's what you say to people. Here are all the objection handlers, and go have fun. I mean, the gym it's awesome. It's amazing. When the product is good and the price is easy, it's a slam dunk. You just have to call people.
Got it. And what would you say are some of the common mistakes or, two or three of things that you think people don't do very well that you would recommend they do to improve their sales, whether it be at a gym, as a realtor, as a, first time solopreneur or something like that?
So for your audience, a solopreneur, I mean, if you're starting a business, the bottom line is your bottom line, period. I mean, if you're not making sales, you're not in business, or you won't be for very long. You're just going to run out of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens super quick. And it's really important to be able to, it's not just sales, meaning it's not just a financial transaction, but sometimes you need to persuade somebody on your idea or your thought, or to come check this out, or whatever it is. You have to be able to or communicate a concept, an idea, a strategy with people, with your community. Ultimately, I think what people don't do enough of is, I think, it's just listen. And it's just listen, because it's kind of like if you called up the doctor today. Let's just pretend you can go in. Let's pretend it's 3 months ago and you can actually go to the doctor and all that. But you go into the doctor and you sit on the table with the crunchy paper, and the doctor walks in and says, "I got the perfect blue pill for you. It's going to change everything." And you're like, "Yeah, but I haven't told you what's wrong with me."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "That doesn't matter. It's going to fix it. It's going to be awesome. Let's just go for it." And that's what most salespeople do. They just start punching you in the face with this sale, but they haven't taken the minute to diagnose. And little things, when you're just listen to what people are saying, like, "Oh, so you hurt your knee and that's why you're here. Tell me more about that. How did you hurt it?" And it's, "Oh, I was running." So it sounds like empathetic statement. It sounds like when you were running, you hurt your knee. Is that correct? Yeah. And people start, you're being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, you can start guiding them. Well, based on what you've told me over here, what I would recommend is this thing over here to give you this new result that you actually want. Does that sound like something that would help you? Like you're understanding where people are at, you're meeting them, and then you're moving them forward.
Right.
But if you don't know what their belief system is, what their strategy is, what their end goal is, and you're just trying to punch them in the face or bludgeon them into a sale, it's never going to happen. And I sadly, I think it happens more than not.
Yeah, it's really a great analogy, because until you put it like that, a lot of people don't realize. I'll also quickly note it is April 29th, so for those listening after the fact, the reason we can't go to the doctor is we're in the midst of COVID. Just for people that might be listening months down the road. It's a great analogy, Shawn. I actually see a lot of that now on LinkedIn. I'd be interested to hear if you get the same of people connecting with you on LinkedIn. And don't get me wrong, I get a lot of awesome connections on LinkedIn, but I also get a good chunk of connections where even in the connection request, like, they're already selling me something, right? And it may be totally irrelevant to anything in my profile. It's clearly copy pasted, which is exhibit A of exactly what not to do. Do you experience the same?
100%. On every platform out there, including email and phone calls. I just randomly got a text probably 45 minutes before we hopped on this
Hmm.
call. Um, uh, yeah, it's really unfortunate, and yeah, it's just it immediately turns us off. Like
Hmm.
we as a community, we love to buy. We love to buy. We hate to be sold.
Hmm.
And as soon as our spidey sense starts tingling, like as soon as they're going in for the pitch, we shut down.
Hmm.
And it's just that's not the best strategy. And like I'm so often my girlfriend jokes to me all the time because when somebody's like really bad at sales, I will just be like, all right, look, this is where you lost me.
Hmm.
And I'll start breaking it down, not to be malice, but to actually help them of like, listen, you went off the rails here. Like this is where you lost me. And if you didn't do this, you would have kept me. And
Yeah.
on the flip side, I recently bought a car. I know, crazy enough, right before COVID. um, and dude, I felt like a little kid. Like the sales rep was so good and just so polished that it's like watching your favorite athlete.
Hmm.
I was just so drawn in and so intrigued and so interested because the way he was able to frame the conversation and pace me and lead me, it was just it was a masterful elegance. And lo and behold, there's a brand new car sitting in my garage.
Right. Very cool. So Shawn, let's go back to or forward to from what we've covered so far. Uh, you get your exam completed. You get your license, and it sounds like you kind of positioned or partnered yourself with someone who was very experienced and in a good position, kind of working with a good range of clients. How did you do that? Because the way I got it, by day I'm an immigration lawyer, and I actually started my practice very similarly, in the sense that I got a very good opportunity to work with the father of a good friend of mine who was on his way out of the industry and basically willing to like hand over his practice, and I got to be he basically mentored me,
Beautiful.
and it was amazing. And I didn't even I fell ass backwards into it, right? I never intended for that to happen. It sounds like yours was a little bit more intentional. Can you walk us through that process of kind of like, would you call her a mentor, or what was that relationship like?
I call her a friend now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say she's a mentor in some capacity. So real estate agents, most people don't know this, but we're 1099. We're 100% self-employed. It's 100% commission based. So I'm a business. She's a business. We're all individual businesses, and we just hang our license. We have to hang our license with the brokerage. In my case, I just happened to be with Compass. At the time, I was with Paragon. So is she. Um, but I did my research. I strategically figured out, as I shared, which companies were producing, went to work for that company, and then I figured out which agents were the heavy hitters. And by that, with real estate or with agents, if you're doing a volume of business, it gets cumbersome. There's
Mm-hmm.
only You can only work 80 hours a week for so many weeks before you start burning out.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew she had a big book of business. And I knew at that time she only had one person on her team, which I then knew she just had a lot of overflow. And in her, there's a lot of agents like that. And most agents will host open houses on the weekend. And it just happened to be that opening weekend, agents like to host their own properties. And I just kind of had a gut instinct that she was going to be there. And so I drove to the property. And as I was driving to the, actually, no, I'm trying to remember the chain of events. So I got to the property. I wore a suit. Like it was the weekend. I wasn't working. I wasn't meeting any clients, but I knew that first impressions matter.
Mm-hmm.
Beelined up to her, stuck out my hand, said, "My name is Shawn. I just wanted to come say hi, meet you, and see your property." Wasn't going to waste her time. Walked around, saw the property, thanked her for her time, left. That was it. That was literally the extent of our conversation. As realtors, we set up our open house signs, which I'm sure everybody's seen. I
Mm-hmm.
got home. I sent her a note. I said, thanks so much for your time. Really nice meeting you. Hey, FYI, the sign at the bottom of the hill blew over. I stood it back up for you. Hope your day's awesome. I mean, the sign may have not been blown over, but it was the goodwill.
Yeah.
And I got a really warm email back like, hey, thanks so much, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a really good book called The Like Switch. I highly recommend it. And it actually has a lot of this type of strategy in there. And then a few weeks later, she had a property pop up on Green Street. And I happened to have worked a few open houses on Green Street, and it happened to be a block away. So I pinged her and I said, hey, it's Shawn again. I noticed that you had this open house. Most open houses are on Saturday and Sunday. If you want me to do any pickup days for you to help expose the property, or do more marketing for it, like, let me know. I'd be happy to help. And I wound up hosting really obscure open house times. But I really focused on just going way over the top and above and beyond. Like, I would text her before I got to the property, which was 30 minutes early. And then I would set up the property. And if anything was off, like a light bulb was out, I'd be like, hey, light bulb, third floor is out. I ran to the store afterwards and replaced it for you. And just way over the top, like deliver and serve. And I picked up a few really crappy open house days, or like Thursday, 3 o'clock. Nobody wants to host those. Like, everybody's working. They're not effective. But I was able to prove myself, prove my performance, prove my attention to detail to her before ever like really going for the sale. And then eventually through that relationship, she's like, well, why don't you just host Saturday, Sunday? And so I started picking up and those are game days. Like, on multi-million-dollar properties, agents don't want to give up those. Those are important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to build enough of a relationship with her where she trusted me to just start hosting those. And it wasn't just with her. Like, my breakout moment was because of her, but afterwards I had developed relationships with a lot of agents, and then I was starting to pick up business just virtue of surrounding myself with all the right people who were successfully doing it.
Got it. And I mean, there's so many lessons you could take from that, Shawn. Working above and beyond, establishing relationships with people, right? All that stuff. How would you equate that to, let's just say, like another random service provider, or any given solopreneur that's, let's say they have an idea, they want to start their business next week. What would you recommend that they do? Or, 2 or 3 pieces of advice, even some that maybe just equate over from the story that you just told us.
Again, solid question. If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting out, I think your bread and butter, somebody told me this years ago, your net worth is equal to your network. Surround yourself
Mm-hmm.
with the right people. And that unto itself is a sale. And one thing that I really do is I focus on the relationship first. The sale will come second. So I treated these agents with relationship first, the business will come second. If you come into my open house, I'm going to lead with relationship first, deliver value, and then business will come second. And because of that, thankfully I've been blessed with repeat business and many referrals. And that's where now I'm pivoting my business to, is really on the referral side. So I would say to that entrepreneur starting out, first of all, you're not alone and you're not first. There's something that's similar. Go find that person who's massively successful in doing it and go spend time with them. And like, sometimes it's as simple as hopping on a podcast like this, and just, if you can just find that one little nugget, that one thing, and go run and execute on that, that's worth its weight in gold. That's time well spent.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, burying your nose in a book, anytime I'm in my car, the radio's never on, like, ever. It's podcasts, audiobooks, And the secret with that, this is the real secret. Ready for this, everybody? Play everything at 2 times speed,
Oh yeah.
and you can get through obviously twice as much. And all I'm looking for is that one nugget out of everything that I'm absorbing.
Yeah, it's such great advice. I remember once, probably about 2 years ago, I was complaining about the price of a book. And because some of them get expensive now, like 20, 30, 40 bucks a book. And a guy I was working with at the time was like, man, think of what it could be worth to your business if you get one piece of information from that book. So exactly like you're saying, whether it be a podcast or anything like that. So that's really great advice, Shawn. So let's talk a little bit about your book. At what point? So you've been working as a realtor for 4 years. What was it that made you want to write a book, and what was it like?
Um, it's hell. um, so working these open houses, the first the question that would always come up is how long have you been doing this? And that's an objection. It's an objection is anytime you can spin it into a question and answer the question into a positive light, you've handled it. But I didn't have an answer. Like no one wanted to work with somebody. I've been doing it for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not going to cut it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I lost a lot of sales. I lost a lot of transactions because I wasn't able, like having a conversation with somebody, they trusted the company, they trusted the product, the home, but they didn't trust me. And they didn't trust that I had the knowledge or experience to facilitate a transaction, to help them through the process, or to be able to help them to navigate around a problem. So, like, I lean into all of these books all the time. Who writes books? People who are authorities on the topic. So I decided, well, the easiest way to become an authority on the topic is write the book. And I literally went home that night and I sat down and started writing. And then I would allocate typically about 2 hours a day. I'd get up in the morning
Wow.
and just write for 2 hours every day. It took me a good, I would say, year to get it. I'm not the best writer. Like it was a slow and painful process. Um, but something magical really happened in that process is when I was at an open house and I would start talking to people, before that question would come up, I would just hand them a copy of the book. And the I noticed that it not only dissolved that question, it inoculated it. It never came up. And instead their mind shifted to, well, how quickly can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, are you qualified to help me? And that was really, it was the pain of all that loss that really fueled me to change my strategy and change it up.
Got it.
Um,
So
yeah, that,
when do you think is the right time for someone to think about writing a book? And then how did you approach it, right? Once you got it into your head, okay, I'm going to write a book. How did you pick the topic?
I went, I did my research on really first and foremost, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? At the end of the day, I needed to create a livelihood for myself and for my family. And to do that, I need to help people buy homes in order for me to get a commission check. And that was the problem. So I started there. And within that, it was, well, what book would then give those people the comfort and confidence that I'm your agent? Like I'm the person who can deliver that for you.
Got it.
And that's really where it started. And then it started with, I went to Amazon one day and I ordered probably 30 books of how to buy a home, how to invest in a home, do's and don'ts of buying a home, like everything and anything under the sun. And I read them and kept notes. And what I did was I started pulling out the common threads of each of the books. All the books had common threads.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, those are the burning questions that people are really asking. Let me, in my own voice, create those answers. And that was kind of what birthed the whole thing. And then on a secondary, I realized I knew this book was for me. It was a marketing tool, and I wasn't creating this as a revenue driver. So if you see the copy of the cover of my book, I'm wearing these crazy socks,
Mm-hmm.
and a portion of the proceeds of every book sold, I donate to a homeless shelter, or an organization rather, that gives socks to homeless people, because that's the one article of clothing that's under donated.
Hmm. Very cool. And very interesting kind of what goes into it. Shawn, I want to touch for the last few minutes of the show on real estate
Yeah.
itself. So can you talk a little bit about what people should consider? I mean, especially given the circumstances right now, but with, let's say, buying a house, house, apartment, a condo, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
What are some of the big struggles that you see most, especially like first time home buyers go through? And do you have any suggestions on how they can overcome some of them?
100%. I would say the two biggest things that first time buyers specifically have outside of the financial piece is their mindset. They go into it thinking this is going to be my forever home, and it's actually a for now home.
Hmm.
And I find the clients who are very successful, they go into it realizing that I'm probably only going to live there for 4 to 7 years, and then I'm going to upgrade. My family is going to grow, or I'm going to start a family. I'm going to evolve. So I think shifting the mindset to a shorter time frame really helps. The other thing that I highly recommend, because this is my relationship with my clients, is like, let's not just look at this as a house, but this is your investment. And this is
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be one of the most significant investments in your life. So one of the tips that was given to me that I share is buy your second home first. So buy the home that you intend to rent or to leverage as an investment property. Buy that one first,
Hmm.
and then move into that more dream home, and use that first home to actually generate some revenue for you. Other smart clients that I've seen is, instead of buying that, oh, I really need to have a single family home, I really need the yard, sacrificing some of the stuff that you just want now to get it later by buying a 2 or 3 unit building and living in one of the units, doing that first, building up some equity, and then either selling it or pulling the money back out of it and then buying that bigger home. I find those are good, solid strategies for building up a, a faster base of wealth, rather than just putting all your money into that big dream home right out of the gate.
Got it. Yeah, those are really good points. I bought a condo for the first time in September, and some of those things that you're
Congrats.
talking about, thank you. They really kind of hit home. We actually have a very fitting and interesting question from one of our live viewers who asks how he should be approaching and figuring out his budget for his first home. Like, so if we're talking about the numbers, about the finance, how do you recommend that first time home buyers kind of approach that?
That's a great question. I have three different directions. One, find a financial advisor, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not. You can actually find them at reasonable prices. Um, I'm trying to remember. Simply Finance. Sarah is the woman's name, but she has a very low flat rate strategy that can help you strategize your future down payment. That's the first piece. The other piece is, I would talk to a bank and discuss with them. They would they want to win your business, if not now, in the future, and they can help strategize what you can potentially afford. on a mortgage side. And then New York Times actually put out a rent first buy calculator, which
Mm,
is awesome. It's 100% free. It's going to take you a minute to fill it out. You might have to actually call your bank to get some of the like the percentage numbers and things like that. And then that'll actually give you a very, very robust breakdown. But the budget it's an intimate and personal thing, and it's like where your threshold of comfort is.
for sure.
But
Yeah,
on the
that's
flip side, just like business, don't overextend yourself.
right. Yeah, and the calculator, it's a great suggestion. I see that a lot. I follow a few Reddit real estate threads or subreddits, and the rent versus buy question comes up all the time. And it's definitely worth even using a calculator that will take in more factors because it'll just give you a better answer, right? It ultimately comes down to dollars, which are numbers, right? So
Mhm.
it's more objective than we think. We have one more follow-up, really interesting question as well. What do you consider in terms of the trade-off between like quality of a piece of real estate versus location? How should we approach kind of that dynamic?
Quality
It
versus location.
yeah, so let's say, like the size or you know how new or we'll call it nice. It's not a great word to use, but how nice a property is versus being in a great location, or how much of each should you sacrifice for the other?
That's a great question. That's a tricky question. It depends on what's the purpose to go back. I always ask another question, and I can't. But I would go back and find out why are you buying it? Like what's the strategy? If it's going to be a rental property, is the location going to hinder your ability to rent it, or is it going to enhance it?
Right.
Is it being close to the freeway going to be a negative or a positive? The location, I know we always hear location, location, location. It's definitely important, but I would rather buy the lesser home on the nicer block than the nicest home on the block because I can always do things to improve the price of the home when I sell it in the future. Um, though you don't want to be in an area that's not going to be that won't appreciate. So the things that
Hmm.
are nice about the home, um, which I know it's a broad, but one of the questions that I like to ask my clients is if you like something or don't like something about a property, put it into one of two categories. Can I change it or is it fixed? And if it's something you can change, then you can then consider the better location and then look at those things that you don't necessarily like, but you can then improve them. If you're going to live there for 7 years, you can always repaint the walls. Like that's
Right.
an easy project.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a great answer and a good way to kind of approach things. Shawn, I have kind of one last question, and I'm happy that I've had some help from the stream to make my job even easier. But what do you recommend people should do in terms of approaching real estate as investors right now, right? So again, I'll remind everyone it's April 29th, right? We're in the midst of COVID. There's a lot going on. Are you seeing this affect real estate investors, and or is it affecting you if you yourself are a real estate investor, or like what are you telling clients who are looking to buy or sell as investors?
That's a great question. So each of the markets is as challenging and changes as much as it's like saying what's the weather in North America today? It's not a possible. You can't just come up with one blanket answer. So each of the markets are
Right.
very different. You have to do your homework. Within that, there's very different ways of making money. You can buy the flip, the property that's in very poor condition that you want to fix up and build it up. During COVID, it's really challenging because in my area, they have deemed a lot of those workers as not essential.
Hmm.
So you could buy the property, but now your carrying costs are going to go through the roof because you can't do any of the work. So it's tricky. There's properties that are just straight rentals. There's the lower quality property that you approve to rent. There's the buy and sell, the buy and hold. There's many different options. But I think overall, what we're seeing not across all markets, but on kind of like a high level, we're not seeing the market go down at this point. And in
Hmm.
actually some hyper specific markets, we're actually seeing it go up and improve.
Wow.
You really got to do your homework. You got to know where you're looking. But more importantly, you have to know what you're looking at. What's your goal? The way that I started researching real estate, gosh, when I was about 20, is I wanted to get into rentals. I knew that with a conventional loan, which is a typical home loan, that goes from single family homes all the way up to 4 units if you're going to occupy one of the units. So what I did was I called brokerages and I literally said to whoever answered the phone, who's the agent who does more transactions within the 2 to 4 unit buildings? I want to talk to them because I knew they knew what to look for. And
Hmm.
that's kind of how I approached it. So I would say do your research, do your homework. It's an investment, it's a long game. I think there's opportunities now, but you want to do your due diligence. But first, figure out what type of investment you want to make and what's your exit strategy and start researching that.
Got it. That's great stuff. I do want to ask one more question because we had one come in, and I think it's super
Sure.
fitting for what we're talking about. This is coming from a live viewer, which is, can you talk about? So you did mention, making improvements to a property. Can you
Yeah.
talk about? I guess this is probably going to be partly an "it depends" answer. But what are some of the improvements you see people make to houses that can add the most in terms of property value, or are there some that can like hurt it? Like kind of what are the best, or what are some to avoid?
That is a Actually, that's a fantastic question. So yeah, I tell my clients, so typically when I sell a property, we in San Francisco, everybody expects it to be perfect. So I tell my clients, we have to make this Instagrammable because somebody is going to want to come in and take a selfie with this in the background. So that's how we have to make it look.
Right.
So sometimes in selling a property, we'll invest 25 to $100,000 to make it look the part. It's got to look awesome because in psychology, we know that everybody wants what everybody wants and nobody wants what nobody wants. So we have to create the draw. So if you invest in updating and making the house look nice to your taste, you're probably going to limit the pool of buyers. So more ideally, you want to stay with a neutral palette. You want to do things that are not shocking, but just more comfortable across a broader audience. The two biggest places to improve a property are the kitchen and the bathroom, period, exclamation point. If you're going to put money into it for a return, put it there.
Hmm.
But again, I caveat that with try not to do things that are too dated in terms of timeline and do things that are going to be a little bit more neutral. What I recommend, so I actually recommended this to my sister who lives in Connecticut, is get the designs or have a designer create the experience. Like show me the pictures as the agent, and I will tell you what will sell in the future.
Hmm. Interesting. It's a good
Like
approach.
run it through a few filters. So this way you can do the improvement now, live there for the next, let's say, 5 years and enjoy it, and then sell it for that higher return. But if you decide to paint the bathroom red and tile it in this crazy blue, chances are it's not gonna do what you wanted it to do on the back end.
Got it. Makes total sense. Shawn, this has been really awesome. Really appreciate you having you coming on the show. If people want to learn more about your services, or you, or your book, or the Solopreneur 180 that you mentioned, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness, the interwebs, best place. The For me personally, you can find most everything on ShawnKunkler.com. As I mentioned earlier, I am on LinkedIn. I actually I've been enjoying that platform a little bit more as of recently. Thanks for tagging me today.
Oh no,
Uh,
I think it's underrated right now.
I agree. I think for especially for solopreneurs, go there, because
Mm-hmm.
it's specific for business. And as we talked about earlier, it's really easy to find your community or people within your community doing that thing or something similar to you. But you can also find me. I go on tangents to be honest, but
they've
you can
been
find me
good
at,
tangents thus far, I must say.
thank you.
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook are all good places to find me as well. And my book's on Amazon. You can just look it up by my name. It's The Insider's Guide to Home Buying, San Francisco edition.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all those in the description. Shawn, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening, everybody, or day, whenever you're listening to this.